Hey, Larkin Rose here. I often describe what I do as stating the bleeding obvious in such a way that any idiot should be able to understand it. Sadly, there still seems to be a demand for that, and not many people seem to be doing that. And the result is that there's a lot of self-evident truths that don't get spoken and don't get understood by a whole lot of people. So this video is definitely going to fall in that category. So let me just jump right in. If two men want to say that they're married and want to have a ceremony and have rings and all that, and somebody else violently attacks them for it, the somebody else is in the wrong. I don't think there's anything all that controversial about that. But if somebody else sees those two men saying they're married, and that somebody else says, "You're not married. Marriage is between a man and a woman, not a man and a man." If somebody else says that, and then somebody violently attacks them for saying that, the one who violently attacked them is the one who's in the wrong. It's kind of sad that this needs to be said out loud, but you should be able to have two people who have differing opinions and express those differing opinions and can peacefully coexist because nobody violently attacks the other one as a result of them expressing their opinion, no matter what you think of their opinion. And this is something that these days, in particular, the political left doesn't seem to understand. Freedom of thought and speech doesn't mean freedom of thought and speech as long as it agrees with whatever you think is proper and enlightened and woke. It means people should be free to give opinions that you don't like and that I don't like and that you think are stupid or obnoxious or bigoted or all sorts of negative things. Freedom of speech and freedom of thought don't mean anything if they only apply to approved thought. Again, the fact that this needs explaining is kind of sad. If somebody was born as a biological man and says they feel like a woman, or if somebody was born biologically as a female and says they feel like a man, nobody should violently attack them for saying that. Now, if somebody else says, "You're not a man, you're a woman. You were born as a woman, and I think what you were born as determines that you're a woman." Or the other way around, "You're not a woman, you were born as a man, and I still see you as a man." Nobody should violently attack them for it. Now, in all the things I'm talking about, you can disagree with them and say they're wrong. You can even call them names. You can make an argument, or you can just have a tantrum, whatever. You can say whatever you want. But if you resort to violence, you're the bad guy, and that's true even if their opinion was stupid or wrong or anything else. Now, thankfully, most of the people who have these opinions on different sides don't resort to the use of force. They can have tantrums and say, "Your opinions are horrible and bigoted and whatever, or demented and perverse," or, they can throw words at each other, which I don't care much about. They don't usually use force, but sometimes they do, and mostly when they do it by way of government. For example, if somebody gets arrested for not using the pronoun that somebody else wanted them to use, in other words, they had a thought, they expressed their thought, and then men with guns of the state took them hostage. The ones with guns who took them hostage are 1,000 million times worse than the person who had an unpopular opinion. To the degree that if they come to arrest someone because you didn't use the right pronoun, the person has the absolute right to defend themselves up to and including killing the people trying to kidnap him, if that's what it takes to prevent that. Again, stating the bleeding obvious. If you advocate that someone be forcibly kidnapped and caged because they wouldn't say the words you wanted them to say, you are evil and insane. You're not woke. You're not progressive. You're not tolerant. You're not about diversity. You're a thought fascist and a lunatic. Now, most people on both sides of these disagreements, thankfully, don't do that. Don't resort to violence. Some of them do. On both sides, some of them do. Now, in these days, the whole woke silliness is pushing way more in the direction of using state violence to enforce left-leaning idiocy instead of right-leaning idiocy, but both sides still do it. There's another factor here that is more important than just letting people say what they want. And hopefully most people can accept, yeah, you should let people say what they want. You can disagree with them and say they're wrong and say they're bigoted and insult them any way you want. Just don't violently attack them. Like, in other words, peacefully coexist with other human beings. That's not that tall an order, I don't think. But then there's this issue called freedom of association, which a whole lot of people don't understand and don't at all respect because they don't actually believe in freedom. Freedom of association means every individual not only has the right to think what he wants to think and say what he wants to say and express his opinions, but he has the right to decide who to associate with, whether you like it and whether I like it or not. So, for example, if some white racist twerp says, I'm not going to serve black people in my restaurant, and I'm not going to hire anybody black, you and I can call him a racist, bigot idiot, which I would, and nobody has the right to force him to associate with somebody he doesn't want to associate with, even if his reasons are stupid and bigoted, because he still owns himself and he still owns his property. So the anti-discrimination laws, and this is going to trigger a bunch of people, they were absolutely immoral. Because anybody has the absolute right on their own property and dealing and trading with what is theirs to choose who to associate with and who to disassociate with. And the freedom of disassociation is so important and so misunderstood by almost everybody, left and right. And I'll give a couple examples in a minute, but I'll start with the totally politically incorrect one. If someone wants to say, I only deal with white people, you can say nasty things about him. I can say nasty things about him. I think he's a racist idiot. And I would never, on my own or by way of government, try to force him to associate with somebody he doesn't want to associate with. I have no right to do that. I would be in the wrong if I tried to force that on him. He can express his stupid opinions. I can say they're stupid. And it's the same thing in the other direction. If some black restaurant owner says, I only allow blacks here and I only hire blacks, I can and would say, you're an idiot racist, but never in a million years would I force you to associate with someone you don't want to associate with, because I believe in your freedom of disassociation, even for stupid reasons, because you don't need my permission and my approval to decide what you do with your property, your money or your house. You can decide if there are a bunch of people who belong to a religion, and because I don't, they say you're not allowed in a church, our church, I would say, okay, I may think you're kind of stupid for saying that, but I'm not going to come into your church. It's your church. You don't let me in. Okay. You have the right to disassociate from me, even if I think your reasons are idiotic. And if all the members of that religion say, you can't come to our houses, and we're not going to sell to you, and we're not going to buy from you, and we're not going to have anything to do with you, okay. I'll point out how stupid I think that is, and then I will absolutely respect your freedom of disassociation. You have the right to disassociate from me. It's a very simple concept, and the vast majority of people don't get it because they think, well, if an opinion is really bad, then they don't have freedom of disassociation. It's okay to force the white racist to hire black people because that's fair. No, it isn't. No, it's not. The violence against him is worse by a lot, is a worse evil than him voluntarily making stupid, bigoted choices of how to trade his time and his effort and who he's going to associate with. And if you don't believe that, you do not believe in freedom. You believe in government-imposed wokeness. And we're seeing a whole bunch of that insanity right now.
For those who have already donated, thank you so much. And for those who haven't, every dollar counts, and the description below says how to do exactly that.
Now, a whole lot of people even understand the concept of freedom of association and disassociation. They mostly think there's an exception when government gets involved. Well, yeah, government should make people, all the discrimination laws, they fired that person for such and such. If you hire someone to mow your lawn, you have the right to fire them, just like they have the right to quit. Both sides of the voluntary transaction have the right to say, yeah, I'm not going to do this anymore. Your reasons might be stupid. They might be bigoted. They might be arbitrary. And it's still your money and your property, so it's still up to you. Just as the person who might mow your lawn might decide, I saw something you posted on Facebook, I'm not going to mow your lawn anymore. Does the government have the right to come along and say, no, you have to keep mowing his lawn? We're going to force you to keep associating and trading with this person because we will decide who you should and shouldn't associate with and disassociate with. No, that's insane and that's evil, whether or not it matches your opinions and your values, and whether or not it matches my opinions or values. I'm not going to force you to associate with me or anybody else. I'm not going to force you to think anything or say any opinion or not say any opinion. That's what actual tolerance looks like. And nobody who believes in government believes in that. I haven't even gotten to the biggest one, so here we go. The biggest reason that you cannot have government and freedom of disassociation. It's utterly impossible. And without freedom of disassociation, you don't have freedom at all. Government and freedom are absolutely incompatible. One very simple reason is taxes. Take, for example, a public school, a euphemism for government schools, paid for by money stolen from property owners. Whether or not they have children, whether or not they support the schools, whether or not their children go there, if they do have children, they are forced to fund it. Now imagine a little town, you don't have to imagine it, this describes pretty much every town in the country, where there's a public school district and all the property owners in that area get robbed by way of property taxes, and if they don't pay up, eventually the sheriff comes to steal their house from them. They're all forced to pay for it. And then one day, a pair of atheist parents hear that, hey, that public school had a Christmas display. Well, we don't believe, we're not Christians. We don't believe in that God. We don't celebrate that holiday. And our kid goes there and you're making us fund that. That's not okay. It's not okay that you're forcing us to pay for the spread of ideas we disagree with. And you know right what? They are absolutely right. That is not at all okay. It is horribly wrong. It is immoral aggression to force someone to pay for ideas they disagree with. So the school goes, so sorry, we're going to take that down right away. And then a few houses over, the Christian family says, wait a minute, we pay taxes too. You make us fund that school too, and we want these ideas. We want to be able to celebrate our beliefs. And it is not fair that we are forced to fund the spread of ideas we disagree with. And maybe some of the things you teach in school not only just leave out Christianity, but actually teach things that we don't believe in and we think are wrong. That's not fair that we're forced to fund that. And you know what? They're right. Which is why public schooling is always immoral. Because the idea that you could ever get an entire town and have everybody in it agree on every single thing that might get taught, that's utterly insane. Of course they're going to disagree on things. And if you take everybody's money and say, okay, now we're going to teach stuff to all your kids. Now you can go to a private school if you also pay for the one you're not using. That's immoral. That's evil. And it doesn't matter whether you agree with the opinions. It doesn't matter whether I agree with the opinions. It's not okay to force people to fund ideas they don't agree with because they have the freedom of disassociation. But the existence of government removes freedom of disassociation. because it forces you to fund not just schools that teach some things you disagree with. It forces you to fund literally 1,000 things, most of which you probably don't even know about, that go directly against what you believe in. All the people who oppose the military and who are forced to fund it anyway, they have no freedom of disassociation. They're forced to fund something they're against. All the people who oppose the welfare state because they think it's destructive, they're forced to fund it. They have no freedom of disassociation. So many of these problems are only complicated because people accept the premise of government. They accept the idea that this monster should steal all of our money, and then we should bitch at each other about how it should have been spent on things that we want rather than things our neighbor wants. You're looking at the wrong enemy. The enemy is the one who doesn't allow you freedom of disassociation, which is absolutely essential to freedom of association. And that's always government. So when you get the story like out of Canada of the wood shop teacher dressed up with giant fake breasts and, you know, that whole story that's coming out, you can be mad at him and say, ew, that's gross. And by the way, nobody should use force against you for saying that's gross. I think it's kind of messed up. That's a mental disorder. That is screwed up. Now, what I think about it, who cares? You're allowed to think something else. And I'm not going to use violence against you for thinking something else. But if you advocate that those parents who are like, ugh, I don't want my kids exposed to that, if you advocate that they be forced to fund that, which they are, you're the bad guy. You're the intolerant one. You're the one who doesn't believe in diversity. You don't believe in freedom of thought. You don't believe in freedom of speech. You don't believe in freedom of association. You don't believe in freedom of disassociation. And as such, do you deserve any of those things? Probably not. And the right and left both do this. Well, I want government to force them to fund the things that I believe in, that match my values and my preferences and my beliefs. But when they do it to me, it's horrible. No, when either of you do it, it's horrible. And you're fighting against the wrong enemy because you're both too unprincipled and dense to realize that as soon as you accept the premise that we don't need freedom of disassociation, we need a centralized collective monster imposing its crappy ideas on all of us, and then we can just bicker amongst ourselves of which crappy ideas should be funded, which should be banned, and which should be promoted, instead of letting people be free. So if you're simply enraged about the other party forcing their views on you, forcing you to fund things you're against while you're doing the exact same thing in the other direction, or trying to do the exact same thing in the other direction, you're a complete hypocrite and you are the problem. The people who are the solution are the people who actually understand freedom. Freedom of thought, freedom of speech, freedom of association, and freedom of disassociation. If there's someone's opinion that make me go, ugh, I want to have nothing to do with you, I should absolutely be allowed to go, ugh, I want to have nothing to do with you. And whether you approve of that or not doesn't matter. What matters is the underlying principle. Either you accept the premise that the monster called government should force enlightenment and wokeness and properness and right think on everybody, in which case you're a control freak, thought fascist, authoritarian psycho pretending to be tolerant and about diversity and caring and all that. Or you can say, yes, I'm willing to let other people think what they think, even if I find it offensive. Say what they say, even if I find it offensive. I'm willing to let them decide who they want to associate with and who they want to disassociate with. And if you advocate that anybody interfere with that, you are what's wrong with the world right now. Left or right, in between, I don't care. If you're one of the people falling for this and trying to get government force on the side of your opinions and thoughts and values and preferences, you are why we can't have peaceful coexistence.
Don't forget to donate.